Robin, welcome home.
Thank you.
So glad that you're here, glad you agreed to do this, and I hope it feels like home. I hope it feels safe. I hope it feels like coming back in some ways. Just glad you're here. We're gonna several times we want to say this to you, and I want to encourage the congregation. Let's welcome Robin, okay? So, we don't have a lot of time, and so we got to jump kind of right into it. I would rather have hours, really, to talk with you. And so maybe we can have you come back, okay? Okay, so let's jump into it.
Got it.
The covenant. We just stood up, we cited it, because there's a sense of creating a sense of belonging to each other when we say words together and sing songs together. So the covenant, where did it come from?
When we decided to become a new church in history to see what impact we could make, we decided that one of the first things we needed to do was to write a covenant. It took us weeks and weeks and weeks, by the way, to write this. It wasn't just an overnight thing. We had developed a unit, a course for adults and for children and teens, by the way, where we dealt with several of the theological understandings: God, Christ, Holy Spirit, and the church. The question that we raised among ourselves was, not surprisingly, what does it mean to be the church? And one of the things that we discovered very quickly was that we had people from a variety of backgrounds. You know, there was a time when you were raised in the Methodist church, you were a Methodist your whole life, Presbyterian, same thing, any of the denominations. We had such a rich, mixed variety of people, not only from Protestant denominations, but from Catholic and Jewish. We decided that maybe our first crack at being a church needed to be defining some of these theological terms that I mentioned that would give this new body of people sort of a target point from which to start.
So that a diverse group would have a shared language.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So God, Christ, Spirit, and church. The church as social pioneer was a big part of that, because there were 4 theologians that were really drawn on to bring this view of life and the role of the church together.
Right.
So if you were to start a church today, would you start with the same covenant?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think that the verbiage in the covenant is still relevant today. There's no question about that. At the same time, there have been a lot of changes over the nearly 50 years now. So I guess I would look at that and see what we decide is pertinent for where we are today as a starting congregation, and then just take it from there. But yes, I think the covenant is still pertinent. Our covenant is.
I think so too, and I have to tell you that when I was looking for a church, and I stumbled upon Shadow Rock, and we kind of stumbled upon each other. And one of the members of the search committee said to me, it would be helpful in preparation for your interview with us that you would know the covenant. And I said, okay. So I took a look at the covenant, and there were pieces of it I recognized from different theologians.
Yes.
And but what I got most excited about is that this was the only church I had ever run into that really was asking the question, what does it mean to be in relationship to history? What does it mean to be on the right side of history?
Mhm.
This was the only church I've ever known to have that as part of their DNA. Was that part of what you're doing?
Yeah, I guess one of the responses I would make to that is how you define right side. How do you define the right side of history?
Yes.
And that is all part of the process that you deal with in writing a covenant or a vision statement. And maybe right isn't the right word, and I don't have another one to fill in, but right as opposed to wrong. I'm just really cautious about being very specific.
Yeah.
It's either wrong or it's right. And
We're gonna have a discussion then.
oh,
That's
right
really
now?
good. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Okay. It's because I have heard that, Robin, that notion of one of the blessings of being in Shadow Rock is that you're not going to get into these shouting matches or these contests about right and wrong. That it is a process of discovery, very much an existential, individual kind of process. Is that what you're affirming?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it's sort of like the situational ethics or situation ethics where, it's one thing to say, you tell your child, I don't ever want you to cross at that road crossing.
Yes.
Well, he comes there one day and the road is flooded. So is it right for him to do what Mom said, or does he have to come up with some kind of an alternate? So that in terms of whatever situation it is you're in, you make a decision, you lift that decision up to history, up to God, and you know that it's God's will for your life somehow. Now that doesn't mean that it won't change tomorrow or next week, but that's kind of the way I see it as a situation. And I don't in any way mean to dispose or find an easy way to get out of defining something as right or wrong.
Right.
Because obviously there are rights and wrongs. But I mean in the bigger picture.
Yeah, so for us, part of I think the evolution of Shadow Rock was to begin very much in that place where we want to hear and honor everybody's journey. And that by virtue of being a human being, you have a place here in this fellowship.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I hear wonderful stories about that where people had this conversation with Bill Smith, for example, and they would say, well, I'm Catholic or I'm Jewish or whatever, and he would say, well, you're a human being, aren't you? Right?
Yeah.
And I think there is an evolution, and I think that part of what's evolved here for Shadow Rock is that we've identified core values out of that journey so far. To say that inclusion and justice and spirituality as the orientation to life, and that may be different to you as it is to someone else, so that we honor all these different spiritual journeys. But we know inclusion, we've decided that inclusion is better than exclusivity. We decided that justice is better than injustice, that love is better than fear or apathy or greed. So there's those kinds of values that are guiding us. But to live those out individually and to live them out corporately as a body,
Right.
man, that's a tough road.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's no question about it. I remember that a lot of the conversation we had evolving out of this was, as an individual, how is it you go out to your job, to your being a mom, a dad, a parent, a teacher, whatever, how is it you go out into the world and be that just one, just one, or that loving one, or that caring one? How is it that you carry out that mandate, if you will? And then it's coming back together corporately that we explored all those kinds of things.
So Robert, is the idea to explore the journey, to have a collective, to have a community, a spiritual family, to explore what that means for us individually? What about us acting collectively?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? And I think there is a creative tension between that individual and corporate action.
Mm-hmm.
Did you experience that discussion, or?
Well, yeah, I'm sure that we did, and of course at that time issues were different than they are today. We were just coming off the Vietnam War and a lot of other things going on. I'll tell you, this is kind of, not to get off the subject or to sidetrack, but we had a kind of a formula that we used when a particular situation would come up about how involved we did or did not become, and that was observe, weigh up, decide, judge, decide, and act. And if whatever it was that you were looking at, you know, if you decide that you're sitting there thinking, you know, maybe I need to go to the bathroom, so you observe that, you weigh up, you know, what would happen if you do or don't, you judge, you make a judgment about whether you're going to go and decide, and then you act, you know. So there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's just using the criteria you have at hand with a social justice situation, immigration, you know, whatever, using a formula like that, or lots of other ones I'm sure that are out there today too. Do you act on it, or do you just, you know, bypass it?
I heard the way of trying to remember that is orange juice with dates added.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You know, hardly a day goes by, honestly, that I don't think of the orange juice with dates added.
Yeah, orange juice with dates added.
Yeah.
As a formula to evaluate your relationship to a particular situation and what you are called upon to do.
Yeah, and that acting does not mean that you're right or wrong about the decision that you're making. Mm-hmm. It means that in your judgment based on all this criteria as a corporate body or as an individual body, do you need to take action on this particular whatever it is?
Okay. All right.
And again, you know, we tried really hard to school ourselves as a cadre that things can change tomorrow. I mean, one of the things we were trying to get away from was the absolutism, that this is absolutely the way you do something, or this is absolutely what is required. We were an experimental church, and by the way, that was really a key, not unsurprising, but that was a key benchmark for us, being experimental educationally, worship, music, everything.
When you say that you're a church without absolutes, does that, do you remember people that said, you know, I can't live with that uncertainty?
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you stick to your own formula that you're trying to evolve here, you bless that decision and, you know, say we love you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And yeah, there were people.
So I've heard a saying that I think would characterize this kind of household ethic for a church, and that is to believe is human, to doubt is divine.
Mm. Yeah.
To doubt is divine.
Yeah, you really need to think about that. I mean,
Yeah.
you need to think about that in your mind, because that, I like that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna share one more thing, and I'm gonna tell on our men's group. Okay.
Oh.
All right. So,
Sure, absolutely.
do you mind being critical of men?
I try. Well, Marilyn, why are you laughing? I try very hard not to be. I do, really.
I know you do. You're such an incredibly gentle, wise spirit.
Well, don't know about it. You haven't seen me on my bad days.
All right, okay, so I'm going to tell on our men's breakfast group, okay? So we were talking about this exercise that we're going to do and what is the role of a vision statement, and that perhaps a vision statement as something for our board, for our congregation to bounce off of as we observe and judge, weigh and decide and act. That we're going to bounce off of a vision statement, that it acts as kind of a compass for us. And if we had been more mindful of that, what would we have done with the issue of immigration that we've been so deeply involved in for the last 4.5, almost 5 years? And part of the discussion that unfolded around the table was the idea that yes, people should be allowed to do that, but there seems to be a line that it becomes an imposition on the church, especially if we say what the line is that it's illegal. If what you're doing is illegal, even if it's to go or not to comply with an unjust law, then you've crossed the line of what the covenant's intention is. What do you think? Well, that's a tough one, I know.
Well, again, using a formula, whatever, you obviously have to weigh up, in this case, for example, the possible illegality over against the need that is there. I guess I'm thinking about all the words that are in the covenant. I guess I don't see the necessary conflict. Did the conversation include a specific on what that conflict might be, or what they did not see in the covenant?
Yeah, I think the conflict was that if it's illegal, then you just shouldn't do it. In other words, it seems to me the assumption is that the church as an institution in society needs to be reflective and supportive, needs to be pro-establishment of that society. And when you break the law, then you are going against established society. If you don't like the law, if you think it's unjust, then you work to change it, but you don't break it. And the counter argument to that is that the only way that unjust laws are changed is when they are challenged, hard challenged, and not complied with, and maybe even broken. Where does the covenant guide us on this? You weren't ready. I forgot to tell you I was going to ask you that question.
You what? I didn't hear what you said.
I forgot to tell you I was going to ask you that question.
By the way, we did not plan this, just kind of big picture. We did not determine. As you were talking, I was thinking about some of the other ideas and thoughts we included, maybe not as obviously in the covenant. But I mean, when you talk about, for example, justing love, what does it mean to build just structures in the world? Well, sometimes you can't put that within a framework to determine what it means to be a just person, a just society, a just program in this case. I would have to say very honestly, and if any of your men are out here, this isn't a personal kind of thing.
Right.
It's just me sort of thinking off the top of my head. If it is honestly thought that, for example, the immigration may be breaking some of the laws, or I just think you need to go back and examine that and kind of weigh up what the needs are, what the opportunities are for this church to meet those needs, and in terms of breaking the law. And I am not suggesting that it's prudent to break the law, but I think the concern that I have is that we not reduce the idea of possibly being illegal to a law. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'm so supportive of any of the immigration issues, so I'm not sure.
So you are admittedly biased
Yes.
in my view, toward my view.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
yeah. I got trapped in that one. If that happens to be your view, then yes, I can.
Yes, so, Robin, I think that you and Bill, Eileen,
Yes.
Marilyn, Greg, so many of the founding members of this congregation have been an incredible blessing to me and to so many thousands of people unknown because of the journey that you started. And I hope that we can continue it with integrity. And I am very grateful to you. Will you come back and talk with us some more?
I would be happy to do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do you have some final words for us? Please?
Can I just tell you sort of a funny story, really unrelated to what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
I ran across some notes the other day, the day that we broke ground for this amazing facilities was May 16th, 1976. 3 very important things happened that day. First was the groundbreaking, and prior to the groundbreaking, Greg and Con Engelhorn and some other men came over here and dug up a huge amount of dirt, took it over to Thunderbird High School and placed it on the cafeteria floor for our service that morning. The second thing that happened, I was ordained on that day, which was very exciting by Shadow Rock. The third thing that happened, which depending on who you ask, may have been the most important thing that happened that day, the Suns, for the first time in their franchise history, made it to the finals. They beat the Spurs that day and would go on to beat the Warriors and then the Celtics, who finally won the competition. But it was so funny because the most wonderful people in our congregation opted to watch that game. And they had Bill's blessing. That's what I was talking about. So, anyhow, that was, no, but I love our covenant. I mean, it's just, to me, it's just sort of the end all and be all. And it's interesting, I don't have it up here, but I still carry my card in my wallet, and I look at it quite regularly. So. And I also wanted to say, I never stop. No, I also wanted to say the comments you said about recognizing the efforts and works of the charter group of people. Any of us looking down through history are so grateful for yourself and for people today who have, who just hang in there and are still, they're like our kids, you know. We're so proud of everybody.
Thank you for that. We'll take that as a blessing and encouragement to continue, and let this not be the last conversation, all right?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Now, I'm going to let you go ahead and do what you have to do.
All right.
I'll get out of
Over
here.
an arm.
Thank you.